You're listening to Remotely One, a podcast that educates, entertains, and inspires you to take your life back from the office commute. I'm Rick, a former beer rep who left the warehouse to become a voice actor and digital creator.
And I'm Kaleem, a remote work advocate and consultant. We're going to speak with some of the top professionals who have managed to avoid the commute as they share stories from the most inspiring to the most comical, all while working remotely.
Man, this sounds awesome. Let's clock in. Where are you located right now?
I am located in my office in Austin, Texas.
That would explain the 1 hour difference, I guess.
Yes. Are you on the East Coast?
I am in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah. Right there where Demetrius is.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I still can't believe that he and I have never connected here in Charlotte.
What?
Yeah, I had to go all the way to D.C. to see him.
Hey, you know, Demetrius makes you come to him. He's like, you...
Yeah, of course.
So listen, I've had some internet issues. We're trying to figure it out. So if some shit happens, we just may have to reset. But
Thank you for being a friend.
what the? Listen, don't come in here overdoing our production quality. You come in here.
You're a pal and a confidant. And if you threw a party,
All right. Just wanted to say, like, you know, everything's all right, Kaleem.
Welcome back, everybody, to Remotely One. I am your co-host, Rick Haney, joined by my esteemed colleague and co-host, Kaleem Clarkson. Hey, brother.
Oh, what's going on, sir? How you doing?
I'm excited, man. We've got a friendly face on this show we haven't seen in a while, and I'm excited to ask some questions.
Yeah, man. Hey, you know, what did you do last weekend, man? Did you do anything fun?
Last weekend, yeah, I went to Florida.
Nice. Did you pee your pants?
Yeah. I mean,
Don't we all?
I mean, you ain't cool unless you pee your pants.
Exactly. And my boy Adam, he knows what he's doing. Good stuff, man. I'm glad he had a good time. We had a good time. Had family around. It was a good time, man. It was a good time.
Yeah, it was different because I had to leave work and go right to the airport, catch a flight, and of course, traveling. I got sick, and I'm now just getting over it, so I'm glad to be back.
You sound great still, though. I mean, when you're the voice of remote work, bro, it looks good on you.
There's never a day off. There's never a day off as the voice of remote work. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Never day off, bro.
Hey, everybody. Since you know how to find us now, do us a huge favor. Go to ratethispodcast.com/remotely one and just leave us a review. Again, ratethispodcast.com/remotely one and leave us a review. If you could do that, we would be ever so thankful. Since 2015, Remotely One is one of the largest communities of remote work professionals with over 3,000 Slack members and 5,000 email subscribers now. Those are no small numbers. And it's all because of viewers and listeners like you. It's free to join. Go check it out, remotely1.com. With that out of the way, Kaleem, give us a tease or two about today's guest.
I have 2 shirts on as usual. I'm sweating it out because these guests, I know these guests, they make me so nervous. Our guest is just so intimidating. The professor, you know what I mean? So here, a couple things about our guest. I mean, you know, like, first off, again, our guest knows some learnings of things, of taughts that he's been taught. He went to Virginia Tech. He's a graduate of Virginia Tech, Rick. Go Hokies. Go Hokies. He currently resides in Austin, Texas. So he's down there. I think they are...
All right.
I don't know. Austinians. We're going to go with that. Viewers, guests, correct us if we're wrong.
Austinians, live at Austin City Limits.
You just went into it. You just went into the ad voice. That was great.
I did. You never seen that show, Austin City Limits? Some of the best music ever performed is on that show.
Love that shit. So earlier in his career, he was a software developer. He was playing around with like Java. He grew up in rural Virginia. Okay, and he just loves hound dogs. And guess what? I've seen his hound dog named Skip, and he's a cool cat. Skip. Guest, how long has Skip been in your family, guest? How long has Skip been in your family?
We adopted Skip back in June, so it's 6 months now.
That's great. We got to get a shot up on the video edit so everybody can fall in love with Skip.
Yeah.
Let's see. Our guest, Rick, He's been a CTO for a few different companies. Just starting off, no big deal, you know. He's been a mentor for Techstars since 2017. So here we go. Here we go.
That's big time.
While he was a CTO, he created the Austin CTO Summit because what? Did you say it's what at the top, guest? Why did you create the CTO Summit? Because it's what at the top?
It's quite lonely at the top.
Right?
It's a long way to the top when you want to rock and roll.
Okay, here we go. Keep going with at the top. Keep going. What else you got? What else you got? What other one-liners you got?
I've never been there, so I don't know.
Started from the bottom, now we're here. Can we do that one?
That's right. That works.
Okay, so our guest, Rick, he's now the founder of Voltage Control, which is a facilitation academy. And you ready to hear some of the companies that Voltage Control has worked with, Rick? You ready? Okay, here we go. NASA, Nike, Google, Gap, Adobe, Dropbox. Ow! Wow! Listeners and viewers, please give a warm welcome to Douglas Ferguson! Let's fucking go! Woo!
Wow. Man, I really enjoy a boxing workout, and it's my favorite way to exercise. And I never actually competed or sparred as a boxer, but man, you brought me right to the ringside.
That's
there.
right.
That's amazing.
Settle down, studio audience. Settle down. We always tell them to quiet, pipe down.
We're civilized here, people.
Thanks for joining us, bro. Thank you.
Yeah, man. It's really great to see you and have you on the show. I have so many questions. But to lead off, I really want to get into your experience as Chief Technology Officer, and certainly with the experiences that kind of led into that role. But what I really want to know is how they all kind of culminated into the formation of the Austin CTO Summit.
Yeah, for sure. As we mentioned, it can often be a bit lonely at the top. When you're at a company, there's only one CTO at a company. And often you're supposed to have all the answers. And you're the one that has to make all the CTO decisions and do all the CTO things. So just out of self-preservation to some degree, I started to assemble colleagues and folks from my network that I felt could support, and we could lean on each other's expertise and help each other. And then that coupled with my passion for community led me to gather folks more frequently and with more intention, and became a monthly meetup. We would gather some months for breakfast, sometimes for happy hours, sometimes for lunches, but we would always circle around the room and have one conversation with each other about whatever concerns were surfacing. And rarely would we ever have a speaker. It was always an opportunity to come together and dialogue, almost like some of the Quaker meetings, right? How they would come together for clarity conventions and whatnot. And I think that's how we got together, just out of curiosity and the work and how we could support each other.
So have you found that through all of these discussions and events and things that you all get together for, the importance of building a solid community, like, can that possibly be overstated?
I guess in some ways people overstate it if they don't understand the real purpose, or if they're not attaching to the right values or doing it for the right reasons. Then sometimes they maybe inflate their activities. But if you're really leaning into community from a real intentional space, and it's really about connecting people and about the relationships that can be built, and about the good work that we can do and how we can elevate the craft together, then the power of community is actually quite impressive, surprisingly powerful, even when you expect it to be so. But I think where maybe it gets overstated is when people just, they're just treating it like social media or something else, right? It's just like, well, let's hire a community manager and run a community. I think we have to be more intentional than that.
Yeah, the reason why you're on this show today, Douglas, is obviously how we met. It's great that you can use online to build a wonderful community, but it is more about engagement. And how we met was at an event, and it was community. And, I consider you my friend now. We have talked a ton of times, and it's helped me significantly in my career, just, talking with you and asking advice and just feedback and stuff. I can't emphasize how important being a part of a true community really is. So I want to say thank you. So I got a question though for you. So you're a former engineer playing around. You love Drupal from what I understand, because everybody does.
I heard it say it.
So, just like a lot of people coding, hitting the keyboard, then you kind of transition to this CTO experience. Can you explain how you became one of the most known facilitators in the US? How did you make the transition to facilitation from being a tech person, especially with the stigma of technologists and developers are introverts? How did you make that transition?
Yeah, it really boils down to a deep interest in collaboration. I, from a young age, was always fascinated about how to do things in concert with other people. And even though I could easily be a loner and go into my room and listen to music for hours on end, when it came to creating things, I was always interested in tinkering with others and noticing what others were doing and how we inspire each other. And that was further reinforced in my pursuits as a musician. So one thing we didn't talk about is in my outside of work interest is that I'm a musician. And in the bands that I would play in, I would never come in with a song fully written. I'd have some of the ideas, some of the riffs, some of the structure in mind, but we would create it together. And the music was always better than anything I would have just created on my own. And the magic of what we develop through collaboration. And so as a CTO, I took those same interests to heart as a leader. And I was always thinking about how we could create sustainable work practices, how we lean into collaborative approaches and tools. There were things like extreme programming, pair programming, and Scrum and Agile, design thinking. And I think the thing that really catapulted me into starting Voltage Control was getting really immersed in the design sprint. And the fascinating point was that Google Ventures led my startup Series A. So I ended up getting to work directly with the Google Ventures design team, building a relationship with Jake Knapp. And that's when I started to think about, wait a second, this stuff that I love doing, that I thought was just a essential part of being a good leader, people do that as a career. And there's maybe a market for that stuff. And then guess what? A lot of leaders aren't realizing they need to develop these skills. And so that's when I started to shift to focus on developing leaders through this idea of building facilitation skills. So you don't have to be a facilitator to leverage these skills, because I think they're essential for any good leader.
Quick question, how would you define facilitation? So not a plug here, but Douglas has a great facilitation event that everybody should check out. What's the name of it now? You're in your 6th year, right?
Yeah, this is year number 6. We went through a little bit of a rebrand. The summit is called Facilitation Lab. It's part of our whole community called Facilitation Lab, and the summit is Facilitation Lab Summit. But the Facilitation Lab community does lots of different things, including the annual summit.
So I had an opportunity to attend it, and it was amazing, man. And one of the things, I never really considered myself a facilitator because, I know that there are levels to this ish, as we would say, quoting the great Jay-Z there, but there's levels to this game. And I was just very intimidated to call myself a facilitator because I know that it takes, it does take some time to, just like anything, to be very skillful at that. So we're sitting there and we're at lunch. It's like, yeah, I don't really consider myself a facilitator. And someone was like, you're absolutely a facilitator. And they went on and explained why I am one. Could you just give a quick kind of definition to maybe some of us who may not think that they're facilitators? How would you define facilitation, and what type of skills are really required to kind of be successful at it?
Yeah, I actually have a pretty good metaphor that I think might help folks out. So, you have professional speakers. So these are folks like Brene Brown that go out. Even Obama goes around and does speeches now, right? And those folks, they do that for a living. But yet, if you are a leader or you are inside of a company, even in sales, you have to give presentations, you have to give speeches, and you don't necessarily consider yourself a professional speaker, but you are a speaker in those moments when you're stepping up and doing that work, right? And so there's a reason why people will go to Toastmasters or go take presentation courses and learn to be better public speakers, because it helps with your work, right? So facilitation is very similar, right? There are people that are full-time facilitators that make a living out of running meetings, but they're not the only people that run meetings. And in fact, in our book Magical Meetings, we have this saying in the book that goes like this: there's no such thing as horrible meetings, just horrible facilitators. And so if you've been a part of a bad meeting, there's someone that could have made that meeting better, right? They could have put more thought into it. And you asked about the skills that come to play in being a facilitator, and we bucket them into 5 qualities or 5 categories. And so if someone's going to improve meetings or be better facilitator, then they need to think about being purposed. So how are we being intentional about how we're gathering, and understanding very clearly why, and making sure that's communicated to everyone? Because even if you know why we're meeting, if everyone that's attending isn't clear on it, then it's not going to go well. Number 2 is that we need to be inclusive. All right, we need to be thoughtful that if we're trying to serve this purpose, who needs to be there and who shouldn't be there. Let's be very mindful about getting the right people in the room and including them in the dialogue so they feel heard and seen, etc. Also, it needs to be crafted. We need to be very intentional about the tools that we learn and we bring in to our meetings, and really intentional about the journey that's unfolding. And it's not just a list of topics. We're really being thoughtful about how we structure it. Just like you run this podcast, right? There's an opening, there's a flow, there's some protocol that you're going through, there's an ending question, there's thoughtful editing. Your podcast episode is crafted, and people should craft their meetings and their engagements with people. Number 4 is that it is clear. And clarity is super important. We want to make sure everyone understands each other and everyone knows where we're going, really is aware of the topic. You know, Brene Brown says clear is kind. I think that's really, really profound. And we have to make sure that if we want psychological safety, clarity is important. And then finally, adaptive. We can't just create an agenda and stick to it no matter what. Right? These are not cattle. These are people. And so how do we listen to what's emerging and respond to it? And so that's probably the thing that takes the most practice, is that adaptability piece. How do we really make sure that we get so skilled at what we do that no matter what happens, we can pivot to meet that need?
Well, let's dive into that real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You've obviously worked with some really big companies, Adobe, Nike, Google. What are some of the challenges regarding facilitating a remote meeting at a big company versus maybe a smaller company?
You know, one thing I think big companies face more than small companies, let's talk about the clarity piece. Yeah. Clarity can be really difficult in big companies, often because of language. And there's a number of ways this could play out, right? If it's a cross-cultural group, like the clear language can be really difficult, because things like metaphor that we use to simplify might not translate to different groups. Also, we might have brand terms that are really strong pillars of our brand, like a word that's used often in ad campaigns or and so like let's say that we have a project that's called Just Do It, and then we're kind of just regurgitating that, and then it's kind of lost any depth of meaning because it's this shallow thing that's been repeated over and over, and people translate it to mean different things in this new context. Then now we think we're aligned because we're using the same words, but we're actually not aligned. So facilitation can be really powerful there, because it can allow us to hit the pause button, slow down, and then invite some deeper dialogue around what do we actually mean. And you'd be surprised how much of a profound effect this will happen, because it has ripple impacts, right? It's similar to, if I go back to my technical days, we often talk about when you discover a bug late in the process, right? Like if a product's been in market, like users have been using it for a year, and a bug gets discovered, it's way more costly to fix it for a number of reasons versus if you just introduced the bug 5 minutes ago and you're just kind of testing some stuff out as you're reworking the code, it's much quicker to fix it because you just introduced it. There's nothing, no other features have been built on top of that bug and its idiosyncrasies. And it's similar to like these bugs in the company OS or the culture, right? If you think about these culture bugs, if they've been around for longer, they're a lot harder to unravel. And if we, let's say in the process of a project we're working on, if we address things early on and we surface up some of the lack of understanding or assumptions that are floating around, people are assuming different things. If we manage to surface that stuff early, we can repair those errors, and they're much less costly to repair when we do that early on.
Yeah, that is interesting. So you've been doing facilitation for a minute now, and now you're certifying other facilitators. You're teaching other facilitators how to be facilitators, so train the trainer training. Really cool program. Prior to the pandemic, I'm assuming that there were a good amount of engagements that you had to do in person, you know, because people were meeting in person. Mm-hmm. You'd probably go there and you'd have, you know, these great workshops during the day and you do your things. Then all of a sudden, you know, the pandemic happens and there are no more meetings in person, but these meetings still take place. And in fact, a lot of people realize that there were probably even more meetings added once we went fully remote. So could you just talk a little bit about like what your experience was as a facilitator training other facilitators, about how you had to kind of shift your thinking and do some of these principles change at all once you start leading remote meetings? What was the difference there once you went from in-person training to now becoming, hey, we have to start training people on how to run remote meetings?
Yeah, you know, I think the main changes are how the space comes together and the point of connection, right? And so whether that's Zoom or Teams or Mural or real-time board, which is the same thing as Miro, but what I was trying to think of was Mentimeter. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the tools will dictate how a design might happen. That kind of comes back to the crafted piece, right? We have to be really solid on how the tools work and how we bring folks together. And so that's a big change, right? And the other big change is the signal shift. And a lot of that has to do with the tools that we use. But it's also important to be aware of as a facilitator, because in the room, we spent our entire career, or, you know, a good amount of time, even prior to our career, just being in rooms with people and noticing people responding. So this whole idea of reading the room as like something that's important to do as a leader and certainly as a facilitator. And when you're in a Zoom or Teams, there is no reading the room. You have to read the Zoom, or you have to read this technology. And so what are the signals, right? Are things coming through chat? Can we see expressions on this like two-dimensional like thumbnail, like Brady Bunch view that we have of people? Or are they using the reaction tools? How are people moving around? We generally need to slow down quite a bit in the virtual setting. We also found very quickly that you can't go for 8 hours straight in the Zoom, you know? So there are a lot of nuances around structuring and designing sessions for virtual that we had to learn. And I think as far as the educational piece, one thing we found in community with everyone was this giant there was a lot of fear, because there were quite a few folks in the facilitation world who had only ever used flip charts. And sticky notes. And so this idea of like, you know, as a technologist and as someone who was running a remote company since 2017, I was very familiar with Mural and all the various tools. I was constantly experimenting with how do we better collaborate. We basically ran our business inside of Google Docs, right? Like just commenting back and forth asynchronously all the time. And there were a lot of people that didn't run their businesses that way, a lot of people that were just unfamiliar with these tools. And so we spent a ton of time in 2020 through our community meetups and just through coaching, just helping people come to terms with that shift. And we don't see quite as much of that anymore, which is now we can get back to like more about the fundamentals, because at the end of the day, a lot of the issues that people saw shifting into the virtual space, apart from some of the tactical things, what they were doing is they were taking bad practices that they had become accustomed to in person, and were doing them virtually. And now in this new environment, everything was new, so they were judging it a lot more. They were more critical of it. And the funny thing is, like, it was just shining a light on these bad practices that weren't really serving them in person either.
Yeah, basically the remote work showed the cracks in the armor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's funny. You were talking about, if I'm correct in hearing you started remote working in 2017. Is that correct?
That's when I started Voltage Control. And in fact, I was remote. I mean, we were very liberal about work at home policies at all of my startups. So we were all very, like, if you wanted to code from home and check in your code, like, it didn't really matter that much, And so we were, at my last startup, we were using Zoom very heavily. But when I started Voltage Control in 2017, even though everyone at first was located in Austin, I just didn't see the need to have them drive to my office. And so everyone was just accustomed to working from home from day one.
That is fantastic.
Roughly, like, what was your first kind of experience? Like, you talked about, like, as a developer. So, like, roughly what year was that? And can you remember any of the fun tools that the fun tools, but, like, it's hilarious to talk about the tools that you would use before today. So can you talk about, like, roughly, like, what year was your real first experience? And then, like, what's different about it from back then?
I think my first experience, if you really want to break it down to remote work, and this wasn't like a full-on the entire company remote working, but as a dev team, we were just like we were just remote working because we were needing to do it. I think it was on AOL Instant Messenger.
Yeah.
And, like, we were literally coding, and we would hit each other up with questions if we ran into something,
What was your AIM name, bro? What was your AIM name? Be truthful.
The American Ruse.
What? American what?
Amazing.
The American Ruse. I know it's spelled D-A, not the. The American Ruse.
Where did you get it? Where did you get it from? Because, like,
I'm a big fan of the band MC5, and that's one of their songs.
That's great. Rick, what was yours? Do you remember yours? Mine was lame.
Mine was Rocky Haven 7-6. It was after my the camp that we had up in on a lake in Maine. That was our camp name. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's not so bad. I thought Rocky Haven was going somewhere else, Rick.
What you must think of me.
So, for everyone that doesn't know what we're talking about, AIM stands for America Online Instant Messenger, right?
Yeah.
I just made that up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great times. That brings me back. Did you ever mess around with IRC?
Yeah, that was more in college, though. By the time I was AOL Instant Messenger had come out. The funny thing is we were all using AOL Instant Messenger, but none of us used AOL. We were like, we don't want that crappy dial-up. We were all getting the CDs in the mail, of course, but like no, we were like, hey, this Instant Messenger is pretty good product, but no one wanted to use anything else. And then we used Skype for a little while, actually, and Skype was really nice because of the phone call capabilities. And we had developers in Ukraine and other places, and this was back in like 2000, I think. Yeah, 2000, 2001. We were starting to use Skype. This was before Microsoft bought them. We could chat and then jump on quick phone calls, little impromptu things. And then, of course, then Slack came out, and we were using Slack for very much the same ways where we're chatting and coding and sharing stuff back and forth. Maybe different wikis would come in and out, like Confluence or what have you, for capturing documentation. And then we generally stayed away from video conferencing until Zoom came out. Because, like, of course, there was, like, GoToMeeting and, like, WebEx and all these things. But, like, it was so finicky, and you always had to, every time you started, it went through a 15-minute upgrade period. It's like, and so we just got in the habit of sticking to either Skype or instant messaging. And then once Zoom came out, I was like, oh, my gosh, this thing actually works reliably. I think that was maybe 2016 or 15 when we first started using Zoom, and I was just blown away because it was so rock solid.
So before we get to the in question, I do have a question for you in general as far as the state of workplace flexibility. The whole world had a taste of autonomy, being able to choose kind of when to get their work done during the day. And we're still kind of in this, I don't know, we're still kind of like in this tug of war between employees and employers. I think I even saw, was it Texas? I think even like they said, or Austin, they had a return to office policy, but it's not working anymore. So they're like, oh, we're going to do this for the environment. We're going to allow the remote working for the environment. You're seeing some cancellations of some return to office policies. You're seeing all these reports of it not happening as good as it should be for some of these executives. Where are you kind of seeing this going, Douglas? Where are you seeing this tug of war going, and where are you seeing the transformation of what is called the workplace? Where do you see this going?
You know, I personally, it's a little hard to know exactly what's running through people's heads, you know, because I'm not talking to any of the folks that are making these policy decisions. So on some level, it's a little baffling. But if I were hazard to guess, I think a lot of it has to do with personal preferences, how they grew up, what they think is like the way things should be, or what's natural or comfortable. It is a complex question, though, because while remote work is highly effective, there are some arguments to acknowledge, which are things like, you know, the workers that are new to the workforce are missing out on it. Because I know I learned a ton by watching more senior developers, just looking over their shoulder, like walking to lunch and like noticing how they had their IDE set up and just going, whoa, what did you do there?
Right,
or like, you know, just like weird little things that you notice and happen. And I mean, there's easy ways to design moments like that for serendipity. But what I'm getting at is this notion of like the guild. Like, how are we creating these mentor relationships to make sure that the newer folks are starting to learn? And this is even more complicated by AI, because folks that are more senior and more established and know how to ask the right questions have a far superior advantage over folks that are just getting started out. Because even though AI can write great code, you have to be able to ask the questions in the right way to get it to make the best stuff. Right. And also you have to have enough judgment to know if it's spitting crap out at you. And so that's the thing I wonder. Like, I would say there's some benefit to in person when it comes to like this relational stuff for noticing and supporting each other. But I think we can be intentional about how we design those things in. And saying we're in the office on Wednesdays or Fridays is a bullshit. Like that's not going to solve anything, right? It's not intentional. It's not thoughtful. It's not really looking at the problem and attending to it. So I think that's what people need to start doing. Also, just pushing people back into a container that was probably not the best container even before the pandemic, and certainly not the best one now, is problematic. Because if you have offices, or if you just have desks strewn about in an open setting, like that's not the kind of thing. If we're really trying to embrace mentor opportunities, if we're trying to embrace collaboration opportunities, ideation opportunities, like what's the best architecture to support that? And I've got a colleague who was part of the Facilitation Lab community for a long time and was a freelancer. And now she's gone to work at the IFC, which is a subsidiary of the World Bank. And she's doing some amazing stuff there around thinking about how they repurpose space inside their buildings and take out like one half of an entire floor and replace it with new programming that really invites new ways of being together and just being mindful of how we support employees' needs. And I think we need more of that. We need more intentional like interior decorating and architecture coming to the table to answer some of these questions. And I think we need to avoid just saying like, oh, it's mandating certain days or certain amounts of time. Let's mandate the behaviors and outcomes we want, and then let's let teams design how they take advantage of it.
Instead of mandating office, let's mandate behaviors. Ooh.
Yes.
I'm loving that.
So can you, if you wouldn't mind, share with us a memorable experience or comical or inspiring moment you had while working remotely?
I went with comical. It's a little bit embarrassing, but you know, I think it's important if you're going to have psychological safety, you have to be willing to be embarrassed, and you have to be willing to make mistakes. And
Right. And actually be cool with people making fun of you after you tell the embarrassing
Yes,
story.
that's right. That's right. So I was preparing for a really important workshop that we were training some folks, and we had to get up really early in the morning because it was a group in the UK, and so I was still half awake but I logged in early because I've got a fairly elaborate setup, and I was getting everything dialed in and tuned in, and I remember I was running behind because Windows had installed an update that morning. So then I had to deal with like rebooting, and I have a whole protocol for rebooting because my Thunderbolt drivers won't actually start unless you like unplug the actual IEC cable, blah, 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 blah. So like there's the whole thing. So I'm going through all that stuff. And then I noticed that Dawn, who was going to be scribing for us that day, she was one of our employees, was in the waiting room. And I let her in, and a couple other things you should note is like I didn't have any of my lights on, and it was like, I hadn't fully set up everything, and Dawn goes, I just hear her say, "You look like a caveman." And my first surprise was that,
oh shit,
wait, how is she commenting on how I look? Because my camera's turned off, and I look over and my camera's on, like, and I hadn't put a shirt on yet, and like it was all dark. And like I'm like hunched over, like trying to fix stuff. So she's like staring at my bare, hairy chest in the dark, grunting on trying to fix stuff. And she's like, "What is happening?" So there.
So easy a caveman could do it.
Oh,
That's good.
I get wet going.
Yeah.
I make fire. That is so good. What a great story. Douglas, where?
Well, I'm at voltagecontrol.com, and also I'm very active on LinkedIn, so look me up.
Awesome. Plug the Facilitation Summit. When's that coming?
That's going to be February 6th and 7th in Austin, Texas, and it's 2 days with 8 different facilitators, so 8 90-minute workshops that are going to connect together and flow, all to benefit the Military Families Center out of the Austin Community
shit.
College.
Wow, charity. Damn, smart, works with clients, and donates to charity, Rick. We gotta
Yes,
separate
Douglas.
these.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, bro. It's nice seeing you as usual. Can't wait to see you again, man.
You've been listening to Remotely One. Visit us at remotely1.com/podcast for upcoming episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our episodes on your favorite podcast app.
Hey, don't forget to clock out.